A big thank you to Babbel for sponsoring today's video, the app that helps you start learning a new language in as little as 3 weeks. And with my code you can get up to 65% off. With the holiday season approaching, it's a perfect time to get learning a new language. The lessons with Babbel are built by over 150 real language teachers and uses award-winning technology. I've been using Babbel myself as I'd love to live in Italy someday. I usually wake up early on the morning and do a quick 15 to 20 minute session on Babbel. Using the app is very easy to fit in your routine as they are quick, efficient and fun. There is still much for me to learn, but the process is very enjoyable. And in my opinion, learning a new language is a great self-improvement project. There are also a number of ways to learn on Babbel, such as podcasts and games. The people who use the app have had great results, and if you're good, you can learn a language in just 3 weeks with 10 to 15 minute lessons every day. So go ahead and click the link in the description or pinned in the comments to get an incredible 65% off your subscription and get learning a new language. And now, onto the video. On the 19th of April 1993, a 51-day-long siege ended with a building engulfed in flames. 80 people died in the fire, with 25 of them being children. At Waco, Texas, the Branch Davidians led by David Koresh fought with the FBI, ATF, and United States Armed Forces. The siege at Waco is the story of a religious cult's wish to bring about Armageddon, and of how government forces were not able to bring about the siege to a peaceful end. The man who would become known as David Koresh was Vernon Howell, born on the 17th of August, 1959. As a child, Vernon suffered from a stutter and he struggled at school, yet he found some semblance of self-worth reading the Bible. He soon was able to recite passages by heart and could recall entire sermons he had listened to on the radio. By the age of 19, Vernon had become a born-again Christian and was a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and had started an illegal relationship with a 15-year-old girl whom he impregnated. By 1981, Vernon was living in Waco, Texas, where he integrated himself with the Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians were an offshoot Christian cult who believed that Armageddon was due soon and that they were God's chosen few. With his unkempt look and guitar, Vernon preached to the congregation with great fervor. Vernon soon began a relationship with the group's leader Lois Roden, and positioned himself as the next leader. Lois's son George, however, would not allow any outsider to take what was rightfully his, and the two began a power struggle, both amassing supporters behind their respective claim. George would succeed in running Vernon off the property, along with a number of his followers. In the next few years, Vernon would travel to Israel, where he claimed to have received divine instruction that he was Cyrus the Great Reborn, and that he was the man who would bring about Judgment Day. Meanwhile, George's rule was not favoured by too many of the Branch Davidians as his mental health declined. In November of 1987, Vernon and George engaged in a gunfight at the group's headquarters, Mount Carmel. Vernon was attempting to find evidence that George had exhumed a body and was attempting to bring it back to life. In October of 1989, George murdered a man named Wayman Dale Adair, striking him in the head with a hatchet. After he was found not guilty on the grounds of diminished responsibility, George was confined to a mental institution, paving the way for Vernon to assume control over the Branch Davidians. Soon after this, Vernon changed his name legally to David Koresh, in homage to Cyrus the Great. Koresh's time as leader was typified by a series of abuses carried out against the congregation. He was alleged to have engaged in multiple illegal acts with children. Koresh decreed that he required multiple wives, some as young as 11 years old. In addition to being paddled with the helper, the children were disciplined by being denied access to food, sometimes for as long as an entire day. All of the children were instilled with the notion that they were the ones to bring about the end of the world led by Koresh. The adults within the Mount Carmel Complex would become subservient to Koresh's whims. He proclaimed that all other men in the complex must remain celibate and that he would take whichever woman he wished. SA was also used as a form of punishment against those who went against Koresh's wishes. In addition, Koresh organized the hoarding of as many weapons as possible. Guns and ammunition would be purchased and resold at a markup, providing a source of income as well as paying for more and more weapons. The Branch Davidians have since been described as a misguided paramilitary community in which sex, violence, fear, love, and religion were all intertwined, with Koresh in the middle worshipped as a prophet. Koresh was soon investigated by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms and Child Protective Services. Former members of the Branch Davidians leveled complaints against what was happening within the Mount Carmel compound, yet nothing came from the allegations of what was happening to the children. The ATF, however, began their investigation into Koresh's stockpiling of weapons when a UPS driver noted a delivery of gunpowder and grenade casings that had been made to the compound. On the 9th of June 1992, the ATF opened their investigation into the Branch Davidians, initially with concerns as to reports of automatic gunfire coming from within the compound. By July, ATF agent David Aguilera visited the Branch Davidians gun dealer, a man named Henry McMahon, who attempted to facilitate contact between Koresh and the ATF over the phone. Koresh initially offered the ATF to carry out an inspection of weapons held at the compound, though this was declined by Aguilera. Instead, the ATF set up a surveillance operation from a small shack in the vicinity of the compound. It's fair to say the undercover agents were conspicuous. Despite never attending any schools and being in their 30s, they attempted to pose as young college students. Nevertheless, an undercover ATF agent named Robert Rodriguez was able to infiltrate the Branch Davidians and provide information. A case had been built against Koresh for his illegal weapons stockpiling, with a warrant for the arrest requested on the 25th of February 1993. Based on reports of high-caliber machine guns being fired from the compound, and evidence that the Branch Davidians were converting semi-automatic rifles to automatic rifles. On the 28th of February, Koresh was discussing the Bible with Rodriguez, when Koresh was called away. On his return, Koresh explained that he had taken a phone call, and was aware that the ATF were planning to arrest him. The warrant had been leaked to the press. A disgruntled Koresh is quoted as saying, "Neither the ATF or the National Guard will ever get me. They're coming, Robert. Their time has come." Agent Rodriguez made his excuses and went to warn his superiors that the element of surprise had been lost. He advised the arrest ought to be called off, yet his warnings were ignored. Koresh by this stage would often claim that the day was the day the government were coming to get him. Yet Rodriguez insisted his warnings were more than the usual rants. The ATF prepared for the arrest of David and the Branch Davidians. They were even able to obtain military equipment as they claimed Koresh was also operating a meth lab from within Mount Carmel, though this was likely no longer the case under Koresh's leadership. The initial plan for the raid was to take the Branch Davidians by surprise by loading agents within horse trailers, so they would not be armed and ready to meet the ATF agents. But by this point, a number of men within the complex had taken up defensive positions. At around 9:45 AM, a convoy of vehicles rolled up to the compound, carrying a number of armed agents in tactical gear. Koresh and a number of his followers went to speak to the agents with a goal of ascertaining the agents' intentions. What is disputed next is who fired the first shot. The ATF insists that the first shot was heard from within the compound, and the Branch Davidian witnesses insist that the shot came from the agents. Other reports claim the first shot was fired by the ATF dog team, who were dispatched to kill the dogs in the Branch Davidian kennel. Whatever the cause, a firefight soon erupted, with Koresh sustaining injuries to his hand and stomach. The fight lasted for around 2 hours. All the while, agents attempted to breach the building and bring the situation to an end. Agents climbed the roofs and smashed through windows. with firefights occurring in the Davidian armory, in the courtyards, and did not slow down until agents started to run low on ammunition. By the end of the 2 hours, 4 ATF agents and 6 Branch Davidians were dead. Following the botched raid, the ATF made contact with Koresh and other leaders of the Branch Davidians.
This is Dave Koresh.
This is who, sir?
David Koresh. Mount Carmel Center, we're being shot all up out here.
Okay, where are you?
Oh, where am I? I'm at Mount Carmel Center.
Okay, hang on just a second.
All right.
Yeah, this Lynch.
Hey, Lynch?
Yeah.
This is David Koresh.
Okay, David.
The notorious. What did you guys do that for? Seals.
All right.
What reward did Christ receive in heaven? He received a book with 7 seals. Now, in the prophecies, it
All
says...
right. Can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
All right. We can talk theology, but right
No,
now...
this is life. This is life and death.
Yes, sir.
Now, you need to learn Deuteronomy 32.
Okay. But let me ask you this. The present situation, what ATF is wanting is to take their injured troop out of your area.
But following the death of the ATF agents, the FBI assumed command, with Jeff Jamar in overall command. The FBI hostage rescue team was led by Commander Richard Rogers. Richard had been previously involved and criticized for his role in the Ruby Ridge siege. I do have a video on the Ruby Ridge incident for those who wish to see more about this event, as these two events do share some similarities. A link will be in the description. Around 900 law enforcement officials descended on the compound, commencing the siege of Mount Carmel. Following the gun battle, Koresh and his followers retreated within the compound. Around 120 members of the Branch Davidians were inside, and a great number of them were children. Negotiations between the Branch Davidians began with the aim of reaching some form of peaceful resolution to the standoff. But initially, Koresh was able to speak to the media, giving a number of interviews over the phone. The FBI soon cut off Koresh's communications to the outside world, though this was not the only utility that was shut off. Power and water to the compound were disconnected, leaving the occupants with only stockpiled rainwater and MRE rations. In the first few days of the siege, an apparent breakthrough was made when Koresh and his followers agreed to leave the compound in exchange for the broadcasting of a sermon prepared by Koresh. The sermon was allowed to be played on national radio, yet following this, Koresh told the investigators that God had revealed to him that he should wait in the building a little longer. Another form of communication between the Branch Davidians and the FBI was by the way of video camera supplied by the negotiators. Koresh would use this to introduce his children and his wives and the way of life within the compound. It was also used to apparently show that those who remained inside the compound did so of their own free will. Aware of the children still caught up in the siege, negotiations were made for the release of as many children as possible. In total, 19 children were released, though 23 still remained. As the standoff progressed with little development, the soft approach by the FBI changed to involve more aggressive tactics to bring the siege to an end. Loud sounds were pumped into the buildings at all hours, ranging from the sounds of animals being killed to pop music. Lights were shined through the windows to make it harder for those inside to sleep. All the while, a large number of military armored vehicles patrolled the perimeter of the compound, often driving over the graves of dead Branch Davidians. While some did leave as a result of these tactics, plenty more remained devoted to Koresh's cause. On the 19th of April, the newly appointed Attorney General, Janet Reno, greenlit the FBI plan to storm Mount Carmel and bring an end to the siege. The FBI insisted that the children inside the complex were being harmed, and that life within the building would only endanger them further. It was made clear that the expense involved in maintaining the siege could no longer be tolerated. Then President Bill Clinton heeded Janet Reno's advice that Mount Carmel should be stormed, but did insist that this was a matter for the states and not for him, and Bill Clinton did state that he would support Reno's decision if she believed it to be the right one. The plan was to use M728 combat engineering tanks to break into the compound, followed up by tear gas deployed to incapacitate the Branch Davidians within. The final assault began at around 6 AM, with loud hailers declaring that the FBI had no intention to kill anyone, and that the Branch Davidians should take cover. Whilst the buildings filled with tear gas, FBI bugs on the building overheard the Branch Davidians saying things like, "Have you poured it yet? In the hallway. Things are poured, right?" For the next 3 hours, the FBI utilized many methods of deploying tear gas into the building, as well as continuing to destroy the building. In response, the Branch Davidians shot at the engineering vehicles. By around 11 AM, it was clear that a number of fires had started in the building, and it is believed these were started by the Branch Davidians using accelerant. The flames soon spread and became visible to all outside, with the high winds on that day only spreading the flames further. As the building collapsed, both from the fire and being bulldozed by military vehicles, a small number of Branch Davidians fled the compound, one of them holding a floppy disk with Koresh's manuscript on the 7 seals, his teaching on how Judgment Day would begin. At around noon, the fire department were called to deal with the blaze, although they were held at the perimeter checkpoint for some time, arriving on the scene at 12:45. By 12:55, the building was razed and the fire dealt with. At the end of the 51-day siege, some 80 people were dead, with 21 of them being children. David Koresh was declared dead in the afternoon as a result of a gunshot wound inflicted during the fire. It's unclear whether this was self-inflicted or by a member of the Branch Davidians. Some 20 children had been shot, with one 3-year-old dying from a stab wound to the chest. In the final moments, it's likely that many members of the Branch Davidians ended their lives rather than leave the compound during the final assault. And they killed their children too. Only 9 Branch Davidians survived. The actions and decisions taken by the FBI and Janet Reno soon came under scrutiny. Comparisons were made between the violent resolution at Waco and the peaceful solution to the standoff at the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord compound. They too were a cult-like group with a paramilitary element, yet bloodshed was avoided. One of the main criticisms leveled at the FBI's response to the siege was the lack of communication between the negotiators and the tactical officers, including the hostage rescue team, who were brought in to put an end to the standoff. Whilst the negotiators may have attempted to reduce the tension, the actions of the tactical squad were not in lockstep, potentially strengthening the resolve of those within Mount Carmel. From the initial botched raid to the final assault, communication was lacking between the various groups present at the site. What's more, there is a suggestion as to whether or not the raid was necessary. David Koresh was the main target for arrest, and it is noted that he was often in the town for supplies and would often jog a particular route most mornings, meaning there was other options other than the doomed raid. A 1993 report into the Waco siege concluded that the initial raid should have been called off. The raid required speed and the element of surprise to make sure any threats within Mount Carmel were not able to mount a response. All of this was lost, and yet ATF leadership insisted the raid go ahead. Whilst it is unlikely that the Branch Davidians were prepared to leave the siege peacefully, as shown in the fires that were started, initial failures that led to the siege in the first place cannot be ignored. But for some, the events at Waco demonstrate massive overreach by the government and the lengths they will go to maintain authority. Some point to missing evidence, such as the bullet-ridden steel door to the compound, or the debate as to whether the ATF or Davidians shot first as evidence of a cover-up. One prime example of someone who believed in some government maleficence was the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh. Timothy had visited the Waco siege in support of the Branch Davidians, and had become radicalized in part due to how the siege was ended. On the 19th of April 1995, 2 years to the day of the final assault, Timothy detonated a truck bomb, killing 168 people and injuring hundreds more. Since the tragic end to the Waco siege, the ATF and FBI have updated their training and procedures as to how to deal with such situations. The 1993 report, which will be available in the description, is now mandatory reading for recruits. Regardless, for some the events at Waco provides evidence of what the government is capable of doing, regardless as to the cost of human life.